Welcome to our channel, where we're diving into the world of Miss Marple through her short stories, an often overlooked part of Agatha Christie's vast crime universe. Unlike her full-length novels, these tales give us a glimpse into the earlier stages of Miss Marple's detective journey, where her sharp observations of village life and human behaviour help her solve some of the most puzzling cases. In this series, we'll follow Miss Marple's life journey through her short stories, arranged not by their publication date, but by the experiences and wisdom she gains as she solves each case. We'll uncover how she evolves from a quiet village lady to a formidable detective, and how her understanding of human nature becomes her greatest weapon. Whether you're a seasoned Christie fan or new to her world, you'll discover Miss Marple in a new light. Her adventures, triumphs, and how she came to be the beloved detective we know today. So let's start with her very first case. Plot summary: The Thumb Mark of St. Peter, Miss Marple's early experiences. In The Thumb Mark of St. Peter, we witness a pivotal moment in Miss Marple's early life, where her natural instincts for solving puzzles first begin to shine. The case is deeply personal. Her niece, Mabel, is accused of poisoning her own husband. Mabel's late husband had been ill for some time, and when he dies under suspicious circumstances, all fingers point to her. Although the village gossip and authorities are quick to condemn Mabel, Miss Marple isn't convinced. She digs deeper into the details of the case, uncovering the significance of a curious black mark left on the deceased man's eye, something no one else thought to question. By carefully observing small details and understanding human behaviour, Miss Marple uncovers the real cause of death. The man had accidentally ingested poison from a bottle of medicine, and the black mark was caused by a fatal mistake. This case not only reveals Miss Marple's keen observational skills, but also sets the stage for her future as a detective who can see beyond the obvious and delve into the deeper complexities of human nature. It's a turning point in her life, one that transforms her from a concerned relative into a sharp-minded investigator who quietly solves mysteries that baffle others. Plot summary: Death by drowning. After the tragic death of Rose Emmett, a young village girl found drowned in a river, the community of St. Mary Mead is abuzz with speculation. Most people assume that Rose, who had recently discovered she was pregnant, took her own life due to the shame and pressure she felt from society. However, Miss Marple's intuition tells her that something is not right. Her knowledge of the village's undercurrents, as well as the personalities involved, allows her to see beyond the surface. Miss Marple quietly investigates, speaking to key individuals in the village and paying close attention to small details others might dismiss. She notices bruises on Rose's body that don't fit the story of suicide. Drawing on her understanding of human behaviour, she pieces together the truth. Rose was not a victim of her own despair, but of a desperate man who wanted to avoid a scandal. The true culprit is Rex Sanford, a local man with whom Rose had been involved. Miss Marple realises that Sanford, fearing the consequences of their relationship, had killed Rose to protect his reputation. This case solidifies Miss Marple's growing reputation as a sharp observer and quiet detective in the village, showing how she can see what others often overlook. Plot summary: The Case of the Caretaker. While recovering from illness, Miss Marple is given a manuscript by Dr. Haydock, her local physician, as a way to keep her mind occupied. The story, however, quickly takes on a more intriguing nature for Miss Marple. It involves a wealthy young woman, Louise, who marries a much older man. The husband, an invalid, is cared for by a local woman, and tensions begin to rise in the household as the young wife seems to lose interest in her husband's condition. When a mysterious accident occurs, suspicion falls upon the young wife, who stands to inherit a fortune. Miss Marple recognises the story's basis in real-life events from the village. The elderly husband's death, which was initially ruled accidental, begins to look more like a cleverly disguised murder, orchestrated by the caretaker of the house rather than the wife. Miss Marple, applying her deep understanding of human behaviour, explains how the caretaker, who had subtly taken control of the household, manipulated the situation to make it appear as though the wife had murdered her husband. The manuscript is revealed to be more than just fiction. It is a reflection of real events that Miss Marple expertly decodes. Her keen insight into relationships and motives once again proves invaluable, showing her skill in solving even the most indirect of mysteries. Plot summary: The Tuesday nightclub. Miss Marple's entry into the world of serious sleuthing begins here, with the formation of the Tuesday nightclub. Her nephew, Raymond West, and his friends gather regularly to discuss unsolved mysteries. The group, filled with intellectuals and seasoned professionals, largely dismisses Miss Marple as a simple village lady, expecting little from her. However, as they share stories and attempt to unravel the mysteries, it's Miss Marple who surprises everyone. In the first mystery they discuss, one of the guests, Sir Henry Clithering, recounts a case involving a poisoned dinner party. While the others, including Raymond, debate complex and far-fetched theories, Miss Marple quietly listens. Drawing on her experience with the village's domestic life, Miss Marple points out the significance of the household maid, who was often overlooked by the others. She explains that the maid, unnoticed by the others, would have had the opportunity to poison the meal due to her routine tasks in the kitchen. Her observations reveal the truth, and the others are left astounded by her sharp deductions. This case not only marks the beginning of Miss Marple's serious sleuthing career, but also establishes her as a formidable detective, whose simple demeanour hides a brilliant mind. Plot summary: The Idle House of Astarte. The second case discussed by the Tuesday nightclub involves a mystery presented by Joyce Lempriere, an artist in the group. She tells the story of a curious death that occurred on a small island near a wealthy estate. The victim, Sir Richard Haydon, had been visiting the island with friends, where they participated in an unusual ritual involving an idol of the goddess Astarte. During this strange ceremony, Sir Richard is seemingly struck dead by a supernatural force. The group debates whether or not the death could have been caused by something occult. While most of the club members entertain ideas of curses and supernatural involvement, Miss Marple remains unconvinced. She sees through the theatrics and focuses instead on the human relationships at play. Miss Marple points out that jealousy, rather than ancient magic, is the true motive. The idol in the ceremony had been used as a dramatic cover for a very human crime. The murderer had staged the scene to make it look like a supernatural occurrence. But Miss Marple's insight into human emotions, particularly jealousy and love, leads her to the correct conclusion. This case underscores her ability to look past sensational distractions and stay grounded in her observations of human nature. Plot summary: Ingots of Gold. The Tuesday nightclub continues with a case presented by Raymond West himself. Raymond recounts his experience in Cornwall, where he and a friend, the archaeologist Meister Trevelyan, became involved in a search for sunken treasure, specifically gold ingots believed to be hidden beneath the sea near a shipwreck. However, the treasure hunt takes a dark turn when Trevelyan disappears under mysterious circumstances. As the group discusses the case, Miss Marple draws on her understanding of human greed and ambition. She notices the subtle details that point to personal motivations rather than the grand treasure hunting scheme others are focused on. While Raymond and the others believe that Trevelyan's disappearance is tied to the treasure, Miss Marple suggests that the crime was rooted in personal relationships and betrayals within the group. She reveals that the murder was committed not for treasure, but for control and power within the expedition itself. Her grasp of the dynamics between the individuals involved allows her to see the truth behind the facade of a treasure hunt, showing once again that her focus on human nature is her most powerful tool. Plot summary: The Bloodstained Pavement. Continuing with the Tuesday nightclub, Joyce Lempriere presents a haunting mystery she encountered while painting in the coastal village of Rathole. During her stay, she meets a couple, Carol and Ted, who are on holiday. Ted is an ex-naval officer, and Carol seems to be deeply in love with him, though something about their relationship feels off to Joyce. One day, Carol goes out for a swim but never returns. Soon after, Ted informs everyone that she has drowned. While most people are quick to dismiss the tragedy as an unfortunate accident, Joyce notices something strange. A bloodstain appears on the pavement near the harbour after Carol's disappearance. The others in the group suggest various outlandish theories, but Miss Marple remains focused on the subtle clues. She points out that the stain could not have come from Carol's drowning, as there was no injury involved. Instead, she deduces that Carol's death was orchestrated by Ted, who had been involved with another woman, with Carol's murder made to look like an accident. The blood-stained pavement, caused by a separate violent incident, was a red herring, but Miss Marple's sharp mind cuts through the distraction. In her usual fashion, she links the details to human motivations, specifically love, jealousy, and betrayal. Plot summary. Motive V. Opportunity. This time, the mystery is presented by Sir Henry Clithering at the Tuesday nightclub, involving a puzzling case from his career. A wealthy woman named Mrs. Rhodes is found murdered in her home, with her husband as the prime suspect. The question at hand is whether Mr. Rhodes had the opportunity to commit the crime, given that he had been out of the house at the time of the murder. Additionally, another person, the young maid, had a potential motive for wanting Mrs. Rhodes dead. As the others in the group argue about whether motive or opportunity is more important, Miss Marple once again focuses on the subtleties of human behaviour. She notices details about Mr. Rhodes' relationship with his wife and his financial situation, which lead her to believe that the husband had indeed orchestrated the murder, even if he was not physically present at the time. Using an accomplice, likely the maid, Mr. Rhodes ensured that the crime was carried out with the perfect blend of motive and opportunity. Miss Marple's conclusion emphasises that both motive and opportunity must be considered, and her understanding of human nature helps her balance these two factors to uncover the truth. Plot summary. The Blue Geranium. In this chilling case, Miss Marple takes the lead as she recounts a mystery she solved on her own, one involving a woman named Mrs. Pritchard, who was known for being hypochondriac and highly superstitious. Mrs. Pritchard became obsessed with fortune-telling and believed that a prediction of her death tied to a mysterious blue geranium would come true. According to the fortune-teller, when the flowers in her wallpaper turned blue, it would signal her impending death. True to the fortune-teller's word, Mrs. Pritchard is found dead, and the flowers on her wallpaper have indeed turned blue. The villagers are baffled and start to believe in the supernatural. But Miss Marple, of course, is not swayed by such ideas. Through careful investigation, she discovers that the blue colour was caused by a chemical reaction. Someone had soaked the wallpaper with a chemical that would react and change colour over time. This person was Mrs. Pritchard's husband, who had orchestrated her death by poisoning her and then staging the supernatural element to cover up the crime. Miss Marple's sharp attention to detail and her understanding of the human mind once again allow her to see through the falsehoods to uncover the truth behind the mystery. Plot summary. The Companion. In this next case, Dr. Lloyd of the Tuesday nightclub shares a mystery he encountered while on holiday in the Canary Islands. Two women, Miss Mary Barton and Miss Amy Durrant, had travelled together as companions, but tragedy strikes when Amy drowns during a swim. The authorities deem it an accident, but Dr. Lloyd can't shake the feeling that something is amiss, as Miss Barton seems strangely detached from the incident. Miss Marple, with her keen understanding of relationships, quickly identifies that the relationship between Miss Barton and Amy Durrant was not as straightforward as it seemed. Miss Barton, it turns out, had switched identities with her companion. Miss Marple deduces that Miss Barton was using Amy to cover up her true identity in an elaborate scheme to escape her past. The drowning was not an accident, but a calculated move to rid herself of her companion and assume a new life. Once again, Miss Marple's ability to unravel complex human relationships leads to the solving of a mystery that others might have missed. Plot summary. The four suspects. In this case, Sir Henry Clithering presents a mystery about the death of a man named Dr. Rosen. a former secret agent who was found dead in his study. 4 people had access to him at the time of his death: his secretary, a gardener, a housekeeper, and a manservant. Dr. Rosen had many enemies from his time as an agent, and the question revolves around which of these 4 suspects is the murderer. As the group discusses the possible motives of each person, Miss Marple once again uses her deep understanding of human nature to cut through the confusion. She points out that the person with the most to gain from Dr. Rosen's death was not one of the obvious suspects, but the secretary, who had secretly been working for Dr. Rosen's enemies. The secretary had orchestrated the murder to appear as though it could have been done by any of the other suspects, hoping to throw off suspicion. Miss Marple's ability to see through the layers of deception leads her to the real culprit, once again proving her unparalleled detective skills. Plot summary. The Herb of Death. The Tuesday nightclub returns with a tale from Mrs. Bantry, a friend of Miss Marple. She recounts the tragic poisoning of a young girl, Sylvia Keene, at a dinner party hosted by Sir Ambrose Bursey. The fatal ingredient had been foxglove, a poisonous plant that had somehow ended up mixed with the herbs used for the meal. While everyone initially believes that the death was an accident, Miss Marple's ears perk up as she hears the details. As the group debates possible suspects, Miss Marple brings her focus to the relationships between the characters, particularly noticing a love triangle between Sylvia, her cousin Maud, and the charming Geoffrey Hamilton. She theorizes that Maud, who had been in love with Geoffrey, may have been driven by jealousy to poison Sylvia, eliminating her rival. However, Miss Marple delves even deeper, realizing that the truth is more tragic. Sylvia had eaten the wrong plate, and the real target had been Geoffrey. The poison had been meant for him, concocted by Maud in a fit of desperation. Once again, Miss Marple's understanding of human emotions and motivations allows her to see past the surface and uncover the bitter truth hidden beneath an unfortunate accident. Plot summary. The affair at the bungalow. In this intriguing mystery, Miss Marple listens as Jane Hellier, a well-known actress and member of the Tuesday nightclub, recounts a bizarre story involving herself. Jane describes how she was approached by a young woman named Helen, who asked her to impersonate her in an elaborate plot. The scheme involved pretending to be Helen for an evening at a bungalow in what seemed to be an innocent ruse to help the young woman out of a tricky situation. However, things take a turn when a robbery takes place during Jane's impersonation, and the case becomes one of fraud and deceit. As Jane tells her story, the group wrestles with various theories, but Miss Marple, as always, remains silent until the right moment. She pieces together the odd behavior of the characters and deduces that the entire situation was a setup, not just to frame Jane for the robbery, but to orchestrate a complex scheme to cover up another crime. The person Jane was impersonating was not innocent at all. Helen had used Jane to divert suspicion. Miss Marple's deduction is sharp, noting that the plot relied on Jane's public persona, and she sees through the layers of deception. This case further solidifies Miss Marple's reputation within the group, as even Jane, the actress accustomed to playing many roles, is outwitted by Miss Marple's acute insight into human duplicity. Plot summary. The thumb mark of Saint. Peter. In this tale, Miss Marple herself brings a mystery to the Tuesday nightclub, one that touches close to home. It involves her niece, Mabel, whose husband, Geoffrey Denman, died under suspicious circumstances. Mabel is accused of poisoning her husband, as their marriage had been strained, and his sudden death raises eyebrows. Stricken with grief, Mabel turns to Miss Marple for help, desperate to clear her name. Miss Marple, who is familiar with her niece's character and the local gossip, starts her own investigation into Geoffrey's death. She notices subtle clues, particularly the appearance of a strange mark on the deceased's body, which others had dismissed as insignificant. Miss Marple identifies the mark as a result of a fish poisoning, specifically from pufferfish, which had been used to make a dish. The real culprit had introduced this poison into Geoffrey's meal, intending to frame Mabel for murder. Miss Marple reveals that the poisoner had been the village doctor, who had his own reasons for eliminating Geoffrey. Her keen attention to the seemingly minor detail of the thumb mark, combined with her understanding of human jealousy and resentment, leads to the resolution of the case. In clearing her niece's name, Miss Marple demonstrates her unwavering commitment to justice and her unparalleled detective abilities. Plot summary: the twin brothers. Next, Miss Marple shares a puzzling case that she encountered, this time featuring the unusual story of a pair of twin brothers, Alfred and John Cartwright. One of the brothers was found dead under mysterious circumstances, and the surviving brother claims innocence. However, the circumstances surrounding the death are suspicious, as the two brothers had been engaged in a bitter rivalry over a family inheritance. Miss Marple, upon hearing the details, notices the subtle tensions between the brothers, recognizing the classic tale of sibling rivalry taken to a deadly extreme. While others are distracted by the complexities of their business dealings, Miss Marple focuses on their personal relationship. She deduces that the surviving brother had staged the death to look like an accident, using the twins' identical appearances to confuse witnesses and hide his guilt. The true motive was greed, with the surviving brother eliminating his twin to claim the entire inheritance. Miss Marple's insight into the psychology of family dynamics proves essential in solving this case, demonstrating her unique ability to see through emotional facades. Plot summary: Miss Marple tells a story. In this personal narrative, Miss Marple recounts her involvement in solving a murder case that baffled many. A wealthy businessman, Mr. Rhodes, was found stabbed to death in his hotel room, with his wife as the prime suspect. Mrs. Rhodes had been staying with her husband in the hotel, but with no clear evidence, she was in danger of being wrongly convicted of the crime. Miss Marple steps in to help Mrs. Rhodes, drawing on her extensive knowledge of human nature and the subtleties of behavior. During her investigation, she notices small inconsistencies in the alibis of the hotel staff, particularly the maid who had been attending to the couple. Miss Marple pieces together the clues and reveals that the murder had been carefully planned by a jealous hotel maid who had been in love with Mr. Rhodes and had decided to eliminate his wife. By shifting the blame onto the wife, the maid hoped to get away with the crime. Miss Marple's unshakable calm and sharp intuition guide her to the truth, saving Mrs. Rhodes from an unjust conviction. Plot summary: the case of the caretaker. In this case, Miss Marple is recovering from an illness when Dr. Haydock, her physician and a friend, shares a story with her to lift her spirits. The story involves a wealthy, elderly woman named Mrs. Murgatroyd, who lives in a large house with her young, beautiful companion, Miss Louisa Bryce. The story takes a dark turn when Mrs. Murgatroyd falls ill and dies, with many suspecting Louisa of foul play. The caretaker of the house, Harry Laxton, is also involved in the suspicions, as he had a motive for wanting Mrs. Murgatroyd dead. He stood to gain financially from her demise. As Dr. Haydock's story unfolds, Miss Marple becomes engrossed and soon realizes that the case involves more than it appears. She deduces that the death was not a simple matter of poisoning by the young companion, as everyone believes. Instead, Miss Marple points out that Mrs. Murgatroyd's death was a result of psychological manipulation by Harry Laxton, who used his position and knowledge to drive the elderly woman to her death, likely by exacerbating her illness. Miss Marple's skill in identifying subtle interpersonal dynamics once again allows her to see through the confusion and unravel the truth, proving her ability to solve even the most perplexing cases from the comfort of her sickbed. Plot summary: the case of the perfect maid. In this charming mystery, Miss Marple is drawn into a household drama involving a maid named Gladys. Gladys works for the Mrs. Skinner, two elderly sisters who are difficult to please. When an expensive brooch goes missing from their home, Gladys is immediately blamed and dismissed from her position. The Mrs. Skinner hire a new maid, Mary Higgins, who appears to be perfect in every way, from her work ethic to her demeanour. However, Miss Marple becomes suspicious when she hears about Mary's flawless record, suspecting that the new maid may not be as innocent as she seems. Miss Marple begins to investigate and discovers that Mary had actually been involved in a series of thefts in other households, using her perfect persona to gain trust before robbing her employers. The missing brooch had not been taken by Gladys, but by Mary herself, who had carefully planned her actions to avoid detection. Miss Marple's astute observation of human behaviour and her experience with household dynamics allow her to expose Mary's deceit. The truth is revealed, and Gladys's name is cleared, thanks to Miss Marple's unyielding sense of justice and her ability to see through the perfect facade. Plot summary: Strange jest. In this delightful case, Miss Marple helps a young couple, Edward and Charmian, who are facing financial troubles. They had recently inherited a plot summary: tape measure murder. In this case, Miss Marple becomes involved in the investigation of a local murder that shocks the village of St. Mary Mead. Mrs. Spenlow, a woman known for her difficult personality and strained marriage, is found strangled in her home shortly after a dressmaker's visit to take her measurements. The police quickly suspect Mr. Spenlow, her husband, believing that he had both the motive and the opportunity to commit the crime. However, Miss Marple, who had known the couple and the dressmaker, senses that something is amiss. Miss Marple begins to look into the details of the case and soon realizes that the dressmaker's visit was not as innocent as it appeared. She pieces together the small inconsistencies in the timeline and behavior of the people involved and concludes that the dressmaker had, in fact, committed the murder. Jealous of Mrs. Spenlow's privileged lifestyle and bitter over her own failed marriage, the dressmaker had carefully planned the crime to make it look as though Mr. Spenlow was the guilty party. Miss Marple's ability to empathize with others and understand the darker aspects of human nature helps her see through the deception, and she assists the police in bringing the true culprit to justice. Plot summary: Greenshaw's folly. In this case, Miss Marple helps her young friend, Raymond West, who becomes involved in the peculiar murder of Miss Greenshaw, an eccentric and wealthy woman who lived in an old mansion known as Greenshaw's Folly. Raymond's friend, a young woman named Louisa, had been working as Miss Greenshaw's secretary and witnessed the murder. Miss Greenshaw was found shot in her home, with no obvious suspect and a confusing set of clues left behind. Miss Marple listens carefully to Louisa's account of the events and begins to unravel the mystery by focusing on the motives of those around Miss Greenshaw. She quickly realizes that the crime was not about robbery or a simple domestic dispute, but was related to a complex inheritance scheme. Miss Greenshaw's distant relatives, desperate to gain control of her fortune, had plotted her murder, using Louisa as an unwitting witness to divert suspicion. Miss Marple's keen observation of the human condition and her ability to see through complicated family dynamics once again leads her to the truth, bringing justice to Miss Greenshaw's killers. As we come to the end of Miss Marple's incredible journey through these short stories, it's clear that her quiet wisdom and deep understanding of human nature are what make her one of Agatha Christie's most beloved characters. Each case, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, unravels a deeper insight into the complexities of life and human behavior. Miss Marple shows us that true strength doesn't come from physical prowess or flashy detective gadgets, but from patience, intuition, and a sharp mind that sees what others overlook. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into her mysteries, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content on your favorite literary characters. And as always, feel free to share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more. And stay